Hello and welcome to your midweek treat. It seems like summer's over, but don't worry, there is sunshine here. It's me, Bruce Aitchison from Happy and Seg-Shaped. I get to be your host, and we're going to hear from the man from Scotland Rugby News, the one and the only Gavin Harper. Hello, sir. How are you?
Very well. Refreshed after a wee week off last week and back ready to go after a busy old weekend of European rugby. So no, it's all good.
Yeah, and with that sun shining, Gav spent the whole week inside because he was scared that he got burnt to a crisp. Anyway, before we get cracking, a quick word from our sponsor. The Scotland Rugby News podcast is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV now. With thousands of jobs across Scotland, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs, so start your search today. Well, Gavin, something I don't think I can remember talking to you about, and I'm not sure I was around and had a platform to talk about Glasgow getting an absolute pasting. That was really, really tough in two ways. One, that was a big score, but and you might be able to tell me the last time Glasgow didn't score a point. I mean, I was at something and I kept refreshing, and I could not believe what was happening in front of my eyes.
Yeah, neither could I. And at half-time in the Aviva, I was on all the kind of stats sites and sending messages to Kevin Miller and others saying, what's Glasgow's record defeat? Have Glasgow ever taken 100 points? Because it was that bad. It was, and actually, it was that bad on the scoreboard. But like at half time, I thought, I don't think Glasgow haven't been woefully bad. Leinster were just absolutely phenomenal, like on a totally different planet, like better than a test team, and like it's such a. So to answer your question, I think January 2020 was the last time Glasgow didn't score a point against Exeter, but this was a different level from that entirely. It was just absolutely brutal from Leinster.
It's almost a let's just not talk about it and move on. Franco, the players, like analysing something like that in the context of a Glasgow season is really tough, because it'll not be that again. But I'm not sure you're going to play against Leinster again. Well, you might if you get to the latter stages or something. But Leinster, today they announced they're signing Rico Ione. Like, I messaged my mate that works in New Zealand, and I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I didn't know anything about it. He's getting his sabbatical." Is Jordy Barrett? Have they just said to Jordy, right? Who's the next cab off the rank? Who do you think we should bring? Or has he said, do you know who you should get? You should give Rico a phone. He'd be magic here. Like, that's not fair. Teams, like, they've got all the big lads. That's not fair.
And similarly, are the players now going, do you know what? I could potentially have 6 months in Leinster, have a good shot at winning the Champions Cup and the URC, head back to New Zealand, and I go back with a couple of medals in my pocket, like, and I might play a dozen games, and they'll all be big knockout games. Most of Jordy Barrett's games are going to be or almost all of them are going to be at the Aviva or Croke Park in front of 60,000. Like, it's just a totally different stratosphere almost from like where it feels like everybody else is.
But where's the sense? Like, what? I didn't get any. Are New Zealand Rugby Union paying their salary? Like, where does this go? Why? Imagine Edinburgh were to sign Beauden Barrett. Like, you'd get really excited and it would be class. But actually, what's the point in that?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting on Friday being in Dublin, because the way Leo Cullen said this a couple of times already today, the way Leo Cullen spoke about Jordy Barrett was like so complimentary that you would have thought they'd signed. Jordy Barrett's a great player, but he's. I think there's bits of his game that he can still get better at. He's probably looking at other people and saying, "Who can I learn from?" And he talked about him like he was a guy who'd played 500 first class, 100 test matches, like a 30-year-old, 35-year-old veteran who's come in and helps the squad out. Like, I think the impact these guys have off the field is massive in such a short space of time. But there is also a point to, the guys that played the first game of the URC season against Edinburgh are now resigned to sitting in the stands because Jordy Barrett's here, Rico Ioane's coming next year. The second rows can't get in because RG Sneeman's here. As to your point earlier, like, it does feel like they've got all the big guys. It's unfair teams, but how do you compete with that? How do even a fully loaded Glasgow would have struggled with that? And that's the worry that, yes, I get, like, they probably will park it and sort of move on, but it's the psychological damage that could do for the latter stage of the URC if they do have to play them again.
Yeah, I kind of get what you mean, but there's also Glasgow weren't at full strength.
Yeah.
And, I've spoken to a couple of people about something similar. When Glasgow win, do you go fully loaded against Glasgow, or do you kind of concede that one's close? Edinburgh, right, you want 5 points, we're going fully loaded, we go against that. Or, the management of your squad resource against different teams, like Zebre this weekend, you would think Glasgow wouldn't have to be full strength to get a bonus point win. You would think. Do you go full blown to get back on the horse, put 50 points on Zebre and nil Zebre to correct that imbalance from last weekend? And the only person that knows any of this is Franco and potentially the coaching team. I think one of the sorer bits from the other night is Matt Fagerson. We can take a beating, but to lose a player at a time where they can't really afford to lose anybody, but to lose Matt Fagerson, that almost felt the sorest bit for the other night.
Yeah, I totally agree. Although there was some sort of encouraging noises coming out of Scotstoun yesterday that it might not actually. We spoke to Pete Murchie and he said it might not be as serious as was first thought. When we saw it live and then hearing Franco speak about it after the game, sounded like that was it. Matt Fagerson's season was over. And as you say, it kind of added to that level of despair almost at the whole evening, because I think you're right. They can't really, with Henko Venter banned, with Jack Dempsey suspended, Vailanu's sort of trying to find his way back from having been out for a long time. Jack Mann's injured. You start looking at that back row, looks pretty threadbare. So it did feel like a significant loss, but let's hope that there's more encouragement comes out of that, and maybe Matt Fagerson does make it back before the end of the season, because he's been such a big player for Glasgow. But you would imagine he'd have a significant role to play with Scotland in the summer as well.
Am I right in saying Henko Venter got player of the match in the game that he got his ban?
Yes, you are right in saying that.
That must be a trivia. Like, I bet Top of the Moon's not picked that one out.
Two tries, man of the match, and a 6-match ban.
Like, that's unreal. But like 6 matches, that's at this time of year, that's 6 of your most important, your top 10 games of the season are these 6 he's going to miss. I just think, maybe Zebre after Leinster is quite a good one. it'd be interesting to see the team that Franco picks and I'd love to know the logic behind it. And I don't know how much he'll give you in a presser about last week compared to this week. And, there's probably a bit of media in there of, we've reviewed it and we've learned our lessons and yada, yada, that we could churn out every week. But Franco's generally pretty honest, isn't he? I just thought you expect Leinster to do well, you expect them to win, but I wasn't expecting that scoreline.
No, totally. I think I would be making it up if I said that I thought I was going to go to Dublin and watch Glasgow win. I think that felt a stretch with the injuries, and particularly when Xander dropped out, you kind of thought, okay, well, let's see what Glasgow can do, and if they can keep it close, who knows? But I never ever expected to see Glasgow in that position, and actually they got a penalty sort of midway through the second half, and it was kind of 15 metres in from touch, close to halfway, and I thought, take the 3. Like, I'm kicking for the posts to not get nilled, and when you're 33-0 down at half time, you're taking anything you possibly can. It was proper tough to watch. But I think the thing about the team selection is really interesting because they've not really got anybody. Xander probably is back this week. Josh Mackay, it sounds like, is fit again.
Do you play Xander against Zebre?
No. If you've got four senior tight heads, and you know that probably Finn Richardson, Schickerling are not going to feature heavily in the playoffs, I think you can afford to take one of, if not both of them, and give Talakai and certainly Xander another week. I think Josh Mackay probably needs a game. I think that might help them. They might move Kyle Rowe. They might move Kyle Stain into the midfield, maybe. I'm totally, this is speculating. But the options aren't huge, because if you look at, 10, for example, Duncan Weir's injured. Tom Jordan's playing 12. So, Adam Hastings might not have much choice but to go again, unless there's a rejig of the whole midfield. So, yeah, a few weeks ago we were saying, it sounds promising. Glasgow might get Hugh and Sione and Dempsey and Cummings back before the end of the season, but they could do with these guys in the next kind of couple of weeks so that they've got games before you're into playoff rugby.
Yeah, it gets to business. Just tough. I mean, Glasgow, the word that you get is that things are positive and they'll bounce back, and they'll keep it in perspective and all those things. So, and maybe it's one less distraction, and Leinster have now got to keep juggling Europe and playoffs and all those things.
Yeah,
so it'll be interesting to see if they get another crack at them. I was a bit gutted, especially when some of my favourites were playing. It was a difficult one to take, but we've all been on the end of hiding at some point. You didn't get too many of them in professional rugby, but I do feel there must be an element of let's just park it and move on. Let's get to Zebre and let's turn one on. There's a few interesting matchups this week in the league positions. There's games that are going to impact not necessarily the top 4, but sort of 4 to 10. Mm-hmm. There are games that look like there could be a bit of moving and shaking. And while there's ones that we think are probably stick-ons like Glasgow Zebre, there's a lot of games that are, there's teams that are waiting for a performance or might nick a result or make things difficult. But then you get into, can you get a losing bonus? Can you get your try? But there's a lot to come. I think I'm not sure if it's exciting, but it's certainly one to keep an eye on, because I don't think the league positions are going to be the way they are just now come the end of the weekend.
No, I think you're right. And if you look at, I'm just looking at the league table now, from Munster in 5th on 39 points to Connacht in 13th, who obviously had a big kind of upheaval today with Pete Wilkin leaving. Any of those teams could end up in the playoff places. There are some a lot of games that have to be played in South Africa, which I think will have a big bearing on the kind of final makeup of the top 8. But I also think that it's so important now that teams need to win all their home games. If you look at Glasgow, for example, Bulls are breathing down their neck, and they'll want to be back in Pretoria for knockout games. Glasgow want to avoid doing what they did last year and having to go away in the playoffs. So, there's loads still to play for, which I think is a great thing at this time of year. You look at other leagues and there may be no relegation, top fours might be done, all that kind of stuff. It's, the URC, there's loads to play for.
When you look at the fit, you've got Leinster, Ulster, first against sixth. Yeah. You're thinking Leinster win that. So Ulster now are going, right, who's coming over our shoulder?
Yeah.
Glasgow should beat Zebre, so Glasgow stay in second and Zebre stay pretty far down. You've then got, what could be a real battle and not one that I would really want to go and watch, but Dragons against Scarlets, because that does massively excite me. But, if Dragons are going to win, they're at home against Scarlets, let's have a crack. The Bulls and Munster, that's like the Bulls, they've got such a difficult period of time of being away for such a long period of time. I don't know if they disappeared or went somewhere for a holiday or a break and didn't do rugby for it. That one's interesting, and it's Munster. You've then got Ospreys Cardiff, which, Cardiff win that and they're in 9th, and all of a sudden they're maybe in 7th, 8th, 10th against 13th. You've already said Emirates Lions in 14th against Benetton, 7th, but Benetton have got to go to Italy. That's going to impact those positions. And then you've got Edinburgh against Sharks, which is where we're going next. I mean, that's talking about Leinster being a test team. I searched the Sharks travelling squad today, and it's a test team that's coming.
And this is where, totally right. And this is where Edinburgh are in a bit of a sort of strange predicament that they're now in a Challenge Cup semi-final, and you want, the guys that play week in, week out, Darcy, Schumann, Gilchrist, Jamie Ritchie, James Lang, you want these guys fit for a semi-final. You don't want to be going into a semi-final with any more injuries. And they need to win probably almost every game to get into the playoffs. But you look at this, the squad, just picking out some of the names: Mapimpi, both Hendrickson brothers, Grant Williams, Ethan Hooker, Apalele Fassi, Andre Esterhazen, Bongi and Banambi, Etzebeth.
I'm so glad Bongi's coming.
Oxen Chase, Sia Khaleesi, Vincent Cock. It's just Pepsi Buthelezi.
I'm not sure those boys are flying Ryanair.
I'm not sure some of them are getting Ryanair seats.
That's what I mean. There's some huge humans there, because we were talking about Jake White obviously coaches the Bulls, and his mentality is, my big truck is bigger than your big truck, so we should. Now, that didn't work last weekend, but basically, if I've got a big one and you've got a small one, my big one's going to win. And that, the Sharks are another level of big guy, of big human. I mean, that I would. Is he going 6'2" bench? If you bring 6 of them off and add 6 fresh, I don't care who they are. I don't care who's. That is a ridiculous proposition for the Edinburgh pack to go up against.
Yeah, totally. And it's an Edinburgh pack, I think, with no Paul Hill. So, you're asking probably Javan or Darcy Ray, who, let's be honest, haven't played a huge amount of rugby in the last kind of couple of months. Although I thought Javen Sebastian was really good at the weekend.
Yeah,
you know,
I
you're
thought there was
asking
quite
them.
a few good performances at the weekend.
Yeah, I did too. You're asking them to go again. You know, Pierre and Boan will be on the other side, presumably, but it's really tough. Like, and Edinburgh don't have that size that they can bring back. You know, Marshall is probably a more sizable option than somebody like Sam Skinner, but he's injured. So, you know, the back row, there's plenty of physicality there, but there's not that sheer mass of human that the Sharks can bring. So it's a really interesting. It'll be a really interesting game. I think it's one that if Edinburgh can get something out of, the playoffs should be within reach.
I don't know enough, and I say this often, that I don't watch enough, but that Sharks team strike me as being one of the stereotypical South African teams. Like the line out for Edinburgh at the weekend was patchy, but it was patchy for both teams for some reason. I'm not. I mean, you and Ashman taking that one at the tail, you know. And I spoke to Stevie Laurie after, and they'd analysed that. They saw that coming. That was deliberate. That's why he was there. And fair play. You and Ashman takes it two-handed above his head, which is decent for a hooker in that position. But that Sharks team is coming to scrum, to maul, to line out. The ball's going to get kicked up in the air. But when they carry, that's going to be really sapping of a defence when those big lumps are carrying. I mean, it's real. I don't think it would take that much to analyse the Sharks. I think even somebody at my level could probably analyse how the Sharks are going to play. And Edinburgh tried a couple of things off first phase, and they had the funny little line out as the first line out of the game, which then got pinged. And, you know, I remember being told very early in my coaching career, always make your first line out simple for the referee. Didn't try and funny the first line out of the game. Now, it was one of those kind of old guard things but, you know, there was a few calls and there was a few squint line outs. But that Sharks team, you have to get somebody in the air so that maybe there's a chance you can call you get a squint throw, which I think is unlikely. Or do you wait until they hit the ground and you try and prevent the drive as early as possible? There's not a lot of teams sack now. Yeah. Because it's very difficult.
It's a real catch-22, because if you stop that, they can go, okay, well, we'll hit, the Hendrickson brothers will hit Am and Esterhuizen in the midfield, and they might end up 5 metres over your gain line, and then one of them puts the ball in the air, and they've got probably the best winger in the world at a time in Mapimpi to go and chase them. And you think, well, how do you, is there a way of being clever about the way or do you just have to front up and say, look, we've got to match the physicality and hope that we get enough of the ball to impart our game on them? Because, if you've got Esterhuizen plus Bongi, Etzebeth and co running at you all day, it could become a long Friday evening.
I thought, and I like the back row of Jamie, Hamish, and Magnus. Like it's a tried and tested back row. They've played together for, Magnus has been away and come back again, but they've played a fair chunk of rugby together. They're not the same. Each one's very different.
Yep.
I thought they went pretty well at the weekend. Magnus describes himself as a straight up and down number 8, and I think he's pretty good at that. When you look at the list of forwards that are unavailable in a game like this, it would be quite nice to have a Luke Crosby to come off the bench and be Luke Crosby. Marshall, you've already mentioned, he's a big lump of a boy. Jamie Hodgson, who was, going well. Paul Hill, obviously, probably the number one tight head in the squad. I know Rob Carmichael's not really there, but he gets off the bench and now he's unavailable. So he's not able to back up anything he did. It's not a full strength team. So that there is going to be an element of, boys, who's ready to front up and show yourself here. And Gilco is going to have to probably go the distance. Ewan Ashman, Dave Cherry, I'm guessing, will be... I think you maybe start Ashy and you bring on Dave Cherry this week, having started Dave Cherry and brought on Ashy. Is that right? Have I got that right?
I think so.
No, I've got that. Pierre and Boan seem like they've been kind of swapping. I think Javan is probably ahead of Darcy. The back row, I think, probably picks itself, but it's going to be a real ask of that forward pack, and the line out is going to have to be absolutely like you cannot give them anything. And
I think the other thing to say about this, there's obviously 4 games of the regular season to go. Like, the fact that it's at the Hive is undoubtedly a factor, because
and it looks like it's going to be a sellout.
Yeah, and Edinburgh's home form's good. They've only been beaten there by Leinster on the first day, that Zebra result. But that Zebra result seems to have given them a kick. And speaking to some of the players in the last couple of weeks, they seem, and they have shown that they've kind of seemed to have turned a bit of a corner. But if you look at the fixtures, coming up,
you owe me a pound.
Yeah,
Edinburgh have turned another corner. You owe me a pound.
Yeah, I know. They've got Sharks at home, away to Zebra, then away to Connacht, then at home to Ulster. And the last thing Edinburgh want is to need basically maximum points from 2 away games, and then still potentially need maximum points in what's likely to be a shootout, as was Benetton last year, against Ulster on the last day. It's really precarious. I think they would be helped massively by any points they can pick up on Friday night, and that might be a bit of the mindset. I'm not sure. I know nobody's going to say that before the game, but if Edinburgh can collect a couple of points on Friday night against that Sharks team, I nearly called them the Springboks. They might as well be.
Different animal, but same beast.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And
you like that. You can use that. If I see that in print, I'm claiming that.
Yeah, you can have it. You can have your. I'll return the pound for.
For using
for Edinburgh's turn.
Do you know? Here's what I'm hoping I hear this week. I'm saying I'm going to hear 2 things this week. There's no many artificial pitches in South Africa, right? And it's wet.
Yep.
Those are the things that it's like when you play against France. Oh, it's raining. No, the French, they like the rain. Because it doesn't rain in France. Like they're not used to playing in the rain. Like they're professional rugby players. Yeah, they do like playing. Those kind of things that you look for are. I know Dave Brailsford talks about the 1%ers, but those things make me laugh. When do you know what's really going to bother Estevez is a plastic pitch and it raining. I bet he'll just stay in the changing room. He'll not be coming out to play. He'll be like, nah, there's good telly on Friday night. I'm not coming out. It's so tough. And I thought Curry and Lang on Saturday, you've harped on about this often, and I have to agree. I think they're the best centre partnership, and I think they look like they play well together. Curry cuts that line, Langer helps, and then he stays on it and finishes it. I thought it was class. Curry, the first 15 minutes, I thought Matt Curry is on it, and then the game just disappeared from him. He just never, he never got a shot, but he looked like, wow, we're on it here. Darcy wasn't quite there. At the weekend, he left the ball behind him at one point that he was kind of annoyed at, and
I think that's a good thing. I think that Darcy Graham not having to sort of step into that role of like don't worry, everybody. Darcy's here. He'll sort it out. Is actually a positive for Edinburgh because they've shown they can score tries and win games without having to, fling it to the fast guy and let's hope he does something. I was encouraged and have been encouraged, and I've been harsh on Edinburgh this season.
You have.
I think rightly so, because we know they're better than what they've produced a lot of the start of the season. But the last sort of 2 or 3 weeks, I've been encouraged by particularly the attack. I think looks much better. It looks like the players now understand what they're trying to do and have bought into it.
It's probably, though, from almost being forced, it's been a more consistent selection as well.
Yeah, totally.
Nine can be different, but they both play. I know that's not going to be the case because Benny's hurt, so it's probably going to be Ali and Chico. But Ross Thompson has played at 10, James Lang at 12, Matt Scott at 13, Darcy at 14, and some guy that turns up every week for every minute at 15. And he started limping on Saturday, I thought, quite early in the game, and I thought, oh no, because we weren't carrying a 15 cover with Masesi and Kami, so that then means somebody ends up going to 15 who's not really playing there, and I doubt training there because you just think Wes will be there the whole time.
I think there was an excellent Freudian slip from you when you said James Lang and Matt Scott. I mean,
did I?
You did. And I mean,
when?
Just a second ago, you said you named the.
Oh, did I? Oh, sorry, right. I thought you meant when I was announcing. I was going to say, on the bus.
No.
Sorry, Matt Curry.
I do think the Matt Scott signing and what's happened there, I think, is one for another day, because that clearly hasn't worked so far, and probably now, let's be honest, isn't going to work, I think. But to go back to Wes, there was a game, was it maybe the Lions game, and he was limping quite heavily at the end, and I thought he's going to have to come off here, and he soldiered on. And on the Monday, or a couple of days after, we spoke to Sean and said, how's Wes? And he just sort of laughed and almost shrugged it off as, yeah, it's Wes, he'll be fine. And that is exactly it. Like, he's become so important to Edinburgh, but because he's always available. Like the best he said when he signed his new contract, the best thing you can be for a coach is available. And it's his first year, he wasn't really, but the last 2 years he's just become one of the first names on the team sheet. And with no Duhan and Boff still struggling, they really need him.
So Harry Patterson's available for selection?
Yes. I think this week is the first week Harry Patterson has actually been available for selection, because they've kind of reintegrated him slowly back in. I worry about, I've said this before, I worry about Harry because I think I looked and he's played a total of about 2 games in terms of 160 minutes or whatever for Edinburgh since that France game. And he's played twice this season. Neither have gone that well from a performance point of view, but, like, he's a young guy who you want on the pitch, obviously talented. Like, it's really tough. But then, now with 4 games to go, are you tempted to throw him back in, or do you just say, do you know what, we just can't, we'll just stick with Wes until Wes can go no more?
I wonder, and Sean's not really done this, but I wonder against Sharks, do you go 6-2 bench?
It's an interesting point, and actually we asked Sean about the makeup of the bench a couple of weeks ago, and he basically, without giving away his team, he basically said Edinburgh, with the players available to them, don't have the sort of bodies that would lend itself to 6-2. And I think that's essentially why they won't, and why they quite often you see them sort of holding one of the backs, often Cammy Scott, back to inside the last 10 minutes, because, you know, if you get an injury and you've potentially emptied the bench, you could be stuck. So it would be the type of game to try it, but I can't see it.
I'm looking again at this Shark squad, and it scares the living daylights out of me. Like, to think they're going to scrum that, to not have scrums, you can't make mistakes. That's a team that's going to force you to make mistakes.
Yeah, and to play over and round and through that team, you're going to have to take risks, and when you take risks, you make mistakes. And
if they kick, which they're capable of doing, if they kick and say to you, right, come on, then you've got to go 80 meters. How do you unlock when the person catching it's got 13 of his teammates in front of him? That you're asking them to make a mistake rather than, you know, necessarily create something. And Maggie's going to have to be a straight up and down number 8 against that lot. So I think he's going to have to carry a huge amount. Gilco's going to have to carry, you know, close to the breakdown, a huge amount. The kickoff pressure, Ross Thompson a couple of times on Saturday I thought was getting charged down because he was the catcher from the kickoff, and he got them away. A couple of them he did really well and got great distance on. One of them didn't. The other thing that worries me, and a couple of the old heads spoke to me after the game. I was actually chatting to Richie Dixon, which was quite a nice thing to do, and he was talking about no right footer in the Edinburgh team.
Yeah, okay.
So Ross had a couple of quite tight to the left touchline penalties to kick for distance, but he was kicking from a left foot, which takes a bit of distance off. There was no right-footed option. If Ali Price starts, which I imagine he does, means it's a left-footed scrum half, left-footed standoff. There's not somebody that's going to take the pressure off and be able to right foot. And then we got into a brilliant discussion about spiral kicks and all sorts. It was brilliant. I mean, Richie Dixon's still sharp as a tack. It was great. I got 5-10 minutes with him after the game, just chewing the fat. It was a really nice thing to do. I think Glasgow, I think we're looking at a bonus point win, back on the horse, you know, potentially using a bit of squad rotation. Edinburgh, I think, have to go full metal jacket with everything they've got. And if they, when you say 2 points, that means they've got to score 4 tries.
Or it finishes 3-3 and they take a draw. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know something? I think I would take a 3-3.
Oh, totally.
It means as a stadium announcer, I would have very little to do. But I could handle. I think I might take a 3-3. Watch this next week. I'll be going, can't believe we won with a bonus point. We won 28-7. How good was it? I think sore bodies, you know, talking about carrying, you know, James Lang. Well, I don't know. Watch this. Does Mosetti come in?
I think he probably does. And I think that's where, but again, I'm now reluctant to break that midfield up because they've played so well. But does Matt Curry go to the wing? Does Ross McCann maybe drop out? Does Matt or James Lang get a rest or rotate out the team? And you put Mosetti at 12 and just say, look, in the same fashion that Magnus is an up and down number 8, you need to be an up and down inside centre and just try and get us over the gain line. But then James Lang, I'm trying to think if James Lang would have been at Quins with Esterhazy, so he might fancy that. You know, there's a lot to it, but it's certainly a big game, and but Edinburgh could do with something. They could do a point at least. Yeah,
I hope so. I hope they get the win. I mean, it'd be class if you got a weekend with Glasgow and Edinburgh winning. Scotland women, decent crowd. I thought the crowd was good. I would still like to see the place full, but you know, it was Italy. It was a Sunday. Yada yada. The game never really got started. It lacked any kind of flow. Both teams made quite a lot of mistakes. It just felt a bit disjointed. Tomo picked up a yellow card. Italy seemed to find the space. There was just it. I actually got a kind of quick word with Brian Eason, and you know, he was a bit frustrated because he felt like they weren't sticking to the process, which is tough when you're put under pressure. It just felt a bit. It just was flat. And then when Fran McGee scored, you thought, right, we're in here. And then they did that very kind of Scottish rugby thing of they then conceded.
Yeah, and I think that's the frustration, is that team's come a long way. You know, they've won 13 of the last 19, I think. But they didn't play well at all, and they dragged themselves back into the game and still had a chance to win it after Fran had scored, and were nowhere from the restart. And you know, it's difficult now to see how they go to more than one win in this Six Nations. You know, Ireland are probably taking that third spot, which leaves Scotland alongside Italy and Wales sort of 4, 5, 6, and that's disappointing. And that'll be the second year if Scotland finish fourth. I think that's right. It would be the second year, but it's tough because it feels like there was a lot of progress, but maybe that's sort of stopped. It's halted a wee bit. I don't know. That was a sore one at the weekend.
I think it's probably a bit like my bugbear with the golden generation, though. It is, but so are other teams. Like,
I get that.
This is Scotland's golden generation. They're no golden, so no one in it. You're only golden if you win something. But we've got a big patch of really strong players at the same time that France are the least French they've ever been, and they have Antoine Dupont. Ireland are set up for Team Ireland, having had 15 years of development, with that being the sole focus. England couldn't continue to be as bad as they were. Italy are better than they've ever been. Yes, this is a good group of players, but you have to look at it in context. Scotland women are the best they've ever been, no question. You know, when you look at some of the stats, Scottish players are right up there. I think Fran McGee's second to Ellie Kildunn for metres made. But Ireland are now flying. Ireland have put resource into their women's programme. They are better. Italy are better. Wales are going through a little bit of turmoil. Their coach has only been in for 20 minutes, so that's been a tough one. But then I'm looking at this England team, and it's a bit like looking at the Sharks team. You know, Marley Packer hasn't played since the first game. And then, and you come to the back row, and you look at that back row, Allcroft, Packer, and Fuanati, and you're... Good luck with that, Rach, and Evie. And I was a bit sad for Evie, and when I was kind of surprised when she was the one that came off first. I wasn't sure, you know, maybe it was meters or whatever it was, but I think she's so important. And then you look at the back line, there's an Aitchison at 10, which, you know, is always a good thing for any team.
It's always a worry.
And then, but you look at the bench, you've got Emily Scarrett on a bit, Helena Rowland, who I think is she could play anywhere. Mo Hunt, they'll be doing a podcast on the bench. Hannah Botterman, Alex Matthew, the depth of that team is absolutely outrageous.
And that's another one, and you know, not that kind of shines a light on where these respective teams are. You know, England are miles in front of just about everybody.
Well, that's 9 changes from the weekend.
You know, Scotland have a luxury of now having a squad. They don't have a luxury of making 9 changes and not seeing a drop to the team. And if it's, I worry about this weekend. If it's close with at half time just after half time and England bring that bench on, they could still rack up a fair old score. And I think
when you saw the Ireland game, it was close at half time, but if you only saw the final score, you'd think, Ireland probably got a token try.
Exactly. But this is where I think this week and next, probably for Brian and for Rachel Malcolm, will be like what Franco's going through this week. It'll be just, we have to play this game. Once it's done, almost park it, forget about it, and try and deal with Ireland. But yeah, I think it's probably the biggest challenge in world rugby is to face the Red Roses at home, and they're absolutely flying. So it feels like mission impossible for Scotland, particularly after a defeat, which and a disappointing performance. The part of me that it hopes that they can sort of sort the performance out and actually play some of their game, because that game at the Hive last year, it's full crowd, and remember the weather was absolutely dismal, and Scotland just never got into the game. They never got going at all, and they never really fired a shot. And I think if they do that again, having done that A last year and B against Italy, that'll be a frustration. So yeah, let's hope they can.
You've got John Mitchell picking a squad for that longer term. Let's win the World Cup. So let's have, the best game in international women's rugby at the moment would be England A against England B, because the depth is so ridiculous. Yeah. And it's so, and I think that if it's terrible weather, that England team have kickers who can put you in the right position, and they've got big humans that can carry and maul. And if it's decent weather, they've got players that have got bags of pace, love to score tries. They've got the skill to move the ball around. They've got forwards who have the skill to move the target. It's kind of frightening what they're capable of. Aye, yeah. Do you know something? And I'm going to say this. I think the Scotland under-18 women and Lindsay Smith might be on the phone going, do you know what? This beating England's not bad. And I look at the team, and this is the sign. It's bad enough I'm getting old, but when my pals' daughters are playing for Scotland under-18, Ella Ray Campbell, that played for Stirling County, who's a massive human, Ella playing at hooker for Scotland. I mean, the Ray family were pretty chuffed. Scarlett Haddo, old man Ross, who was lightning quick, playing Ellen Nimmo, Gillian, who does a heap of work up at Boroughmuir's daughter. Yep. I mean, I don't know who's more proud. You'd struggle to find somebody more than Gillian. I mean, brilliant to see stuff like that. And we've known about Scotland male for under 18s and 16s since time began. To see Scotland under 18 women getting the exposure they're getting, turning in results like that, it gives you a fair bit of hope and a big smile on your face.
Totally, and they played pretty well, scored some good tries, and
they did.
And yeah, they weren't able to back it up against Ireland, but you've got to take some encouragement from the fact that they've turned over England. The players, some of them, there's some impressive individuals. It'd be really interesting to see how quickly after this World Cup cycle did some of them progress into sort of senior Scotland reckoning, because there's more depth, but there's not huge depth, and some of them looked seriously impressive. I thought, like Mellenby at 10 was superb. So how quickly do you sort of fast track somebody in a position like that? Who knows? But I think the other thing is there'll be a fair bit of turnover in the Scotland senior squad probably after the World Cup. You look at there's a few that are maybe thinking about, is this am I going to continue on beyond the World Cup, or am I staying for the Lions, or what does it look like? But
yeah, there's going to be a massive chunk of them staying for the Lions. I think that's the next target after the World Cup. They'll not tell you that, but they are.
It's a long way away though. It's it's another basically 2
but it's the first time that you're hanging on for that. You're
100%.
You're hanging on for that. Do you know what? I think we might have to make a feature on here of Bruce's grumps, but I'm gonna bring this out here because it's now filtered its way down to the Scotland under-18 women, and it winds me up. This whole co-captaincy nonsense, like just who's, especially when you have teams where the co-captains are like both in the forwards or they're players that are going to go off at, like, who's your captain? Like, who's your captain? And didn't give me this, or they're going to talk to them about the breakdown, or that's the captain who talks to the referee, and that's the captain. Who's your captain? Come on.
Do you know the one I really dislike? And I know that this probably actually makes more sense. But if you've got a captain, a co-captain, look at Edinburgh, for example. If Gilco starts and Ben's on the bench, Gilco is the captain. But you see some teams list them both, and like the wee team sheet has 21 co-captain, and I think, like, you're not, mate. You're on the bench. Like
what's wrong with, like, are we offending people if you're the vice captain? Is this what we've got to? You can't just have a captain and a vice captain, or a. Remember in the old days we used to have a leader of the pack.
A pack leader, incredible. It's just,
who's the pack leader? Like, those are the questions the refs should be asking before the game. Who's your hooker? Who's your pack leader? That's I didn't, not who's your co-captain. Didn't give me that.
I mean, like, look at England during the Six Nations. England men, 4 vice captains. Like why? What, they have on Zoom with a ref? Like,
that's been a lot of letters from parents saying, "Why has my son not got a job?" That's what that is. That's Tiger parents going, my son needs to have a. Why is he not? What's his responsibility? We've put him in charge of the tackle bags for the warm up. That's his leadership opportunity, and if he's a good boy and he does it right, he might get to be a co-vice leader in the next cycle after the Olympics. I hate that stuff as well.
Do you know you're 100% right, and I think we can put co-captains in the unofficial Scotland Rugby News podcast Room 101. I hate them. Yeah,
and what I saw one there, I actually screenshotted it and then I deleted it because my phone keeps telling me I've no storage. It wasn't finishers. And they had some ridiculous name for subs.
It wasn't impact players.
No, it was even worse. I wish I'd paid attention to it. I'll see if I can find it again. But, like, are you starting this weekend, son? No, Dad, I'm a sub. Right, okay. Like, everybody got that. Are you starting this weekend, son? No, I'm an impact player, Dad. No. Like, Dad, are you starting this weekend, son? No, Dad, I'm a finisher. Do you know what also makes you laugh is when a finisher doesn't get a game?
Yes.
What are they? Yes. What are you when you're a finisher, or if you're an impact player doesn't get on? What are you?
An impact player.
A decompression player. What, a cushion player. Anyway,
I think we've digressed severely.
I'm rambling. We've now got nobody listening or watching. Big fella, I'll see you on Friday. Sold out of the Hive, I reckon. We're getting close. I think it's standing room only down at the Riverside end. There's going to be folk for Oliver. I think there's actually an American kids touring team going to be in town and all sorts. So it could be quite exciting.
I think I saw semi-final tickets are almost away. Is that right?
Pass. You are the man. You're the news hound. So you'll have sniffed that one out. That's beaten me, I have to admit.
I think I saw that. I've certainly asked Edinburgh, but I was pretty sure. Let me just see if I can quickly find this. certainly there was a few folk on.
The general sale started at 2:00 this afternoon. Season ticket holders and Castle Club, I think, had been able to get theirs yesterday.
Yeah, quite a few folk had been on to me this afternoon. Usual, oh, do you know any way I could get any tickets? I'm struggling to get them on the website.
There's the next flipping 101. Didn't get me started on that.
Won't get phone for tickets.
Didn't get me started on that one because I have tickets falling out my pockets. Do you know what I've also got? I've also got heaps of signed Scotland jerseys. Let me just go and get you one now from my collection.
Well, if you can't find one, we've got loads and loads and loads and loads of signed merch, loads of tickets. Yeah, usual.
I'm coming to you then. Gav, good to see you. No doubt I'll catch you on Friday and we might get some sunshine. A final word from our sponsor. The Scotland Rugby News podcast was brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, head over to s1jobs.com and upload your CV right now. There are thousands of jobs all across Scotland and you can find the one for you at S1 Jobs. So start your search today. Have a great evening, have a great week, and hopefully you'll enjoy your rugby at the weekend. We'll speak to you all again very, very soon. But for now, bye-bye.